willing to give all that you have. So with that, we'll unmute our mics across the country and give a warm welcome to one of the great players and one of the great men of the game, Pro Football Hall of Famer, Mr. Mel Blount.
Thank you very much. Let me just, first of all, say what an honor it is to be here at Cleveland State. I do have ties here. My son, Jabri, is on the basketball team here, so it's good to have all the basketball players here in this session. And I just want you guys to know how honored I am to have this opportunity to sit before you and talk, and to have my son in the audience. We talked, you heard Mike talk about the mission of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, which is to honor his heroes and to preserve its history, promote its values, and to celebrate excellence everywhere. And I am so honored when I think about where I started from, being the youngest of 11 children, growing up on a farm in the Deep South in Georgia, growing up doing segregation. I can remember times when I had to get a ride from school after practice because the bus ran and you stay after practice. A lot of times the coach would drive me home. And I remember thinking, you know, maybe someday this might all be worth it. And I remember when Southern University came to scout me. And that particular game, I scored 5 touchdowns. I was a wide receiver and played defensive end. I ran kickoffs back. And they offered me a scholarship. And so I had an opportunity to go to Southern University, graduated one day. The next day I was on a Greyhound bus from Vidalia, Georgia to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I never knew that my journey would take me all the way to Canton, Ohio. But I think it says a lot about what commitment is, a lot about what dedication is, and the pure will and desire to reach the goals that you set. So it's a pleasure for me to be here. I'm looking forward to interacting, dialoguing, answering questions, and just really helping you to understand really what success really means and what it takes to get there, and how every step that you make and the closer you get, how you have to humble yourself. And a lot of my family would tell you that I don't even talk about that I'm in the Hall of Fame. I don't talk about the 4 Super Bowls. I'm humbled by that. And I love that, I appreciate it, but I'm not the kind of guy, and any Hall of Fame and any successful person don't go around bragging about their success. If anything, they try to instill in other people what it takes and the kind of commitment that it takes to be successful. So with that being said, Mike, I'm honored to be here, and we can open up for question and answer.
And just for our schools that are turning via the video conference, we were talking here at CSU a little bit about the odds of being a Pro Football Hall of Famer. And for you guys, we shared the stat, there's over 100 million boys and girls that have played the game of football. There's only 2.2 million that played the game at the college level. There's only 27,000 who have been paid to play, coach, officiate, or administer the game. And there's only 303 members of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So we really do have the opportunity to talk to someone, pick the brain of someone who has reached the highest level in their chosen profession. And we'll talk about football today. We'll probably talk about basketball, and who knows, we might even talk about baseball because we got a pretty big game down the street here tonight. But we're really going to talk about the character values that take average athletes or great athletes and transform them into the greatest who have ever played the game. So I'm going to start. I have a question to kind of kick us off. Okay, good. You were the youngest of 11, and we focus a lot on, Gold Jacket, Hall of Fame, Steel Curtain, greatest defense of all time. But at some point, you were a rookie on that team. At some point, you were a freshman in college coming into a new situation. You were a freshman in high school on a new team. What challenges did you face in that situation, and how did you fit in? How did you kind of carve out your own niche? What did you really rely back on to elevate from that situation?
Well, Mike, one of the things that I think is so critical, and that's a person's background, the foundation of a person, how they was raised, their values, the things that they believe in. I don't know, most of y'all might know that I have a boys' home. I've been working with young kids ever since 1983. And one of the things, you can always tell kids who have had that foundation, who've really been, that they had good parenting. And so when I look back at my journey, there were some great challenges. I had never been away from home. We grew up on a farm in Vidalia, Georgia, and my dad would always keep us a job. And he said that he didn't want us to go, he didn't want to take us into town because he didn't want any problems. He didn't want anybody spitting on us or throwing rocks at us or anything that would be a distraction and possibly be a problem. So he kept us a job. And he was a man that knew exactly, if he gave us a job, he knew exactly how much time it would take for us to finish that job. He would go off somewhere and across the field checking on somebody else's work, but he would always come back, and when we finished that job, he would have us another. And we would be in church every Sunday. I remember, and we still do that now, it's something I learned with my family. We pray before every meal. We pray every night. We pray as a family. So that foundation that I'm talking about being built in me, so that when I got to college, like a lot of young people, you get to college and you say, oh man, I'm free, I can do this and I do that. But you might stray, but you'll always come back to the center based on the way you was raised. And so when I went off to college, the biggest issue I had, I was lonely because I had come from a close-knit family. I missed my sisters and brothers. I missed the farm. I missed the animals, the horses. We didn't have cars and trucks and tractors. We had mules and sleds and wagons. And that's kind of what stuck with me when I did get into the pros, the horses and the animals. And so that's why you see me looking like this, because I ride horses. I mean, I grew up flying mules and flying horses. So that's who I am. That's a part of my life. But you can talk to any Hall of Famer, or you can talk to any successful person, or you can talk to anybody successful. They'll tell you they had challenges, but it's how you deal with those challenges. And with my loneliness, with my being away from my home, being away from my family, I remember the prayers that my parents prayed, and I remember the sermons that the pastor preached in church. And so I had something to draw from. And so I had a good spiritual upbringing and a good spiritual nature about me to help me get through these difficult times.
Do we have anyone who wants to ask our first question here at CSU?
Right. Was football always your sport, or did you have like love for any other sports growing up as well? And if so, why did you choose football?
I had a love for basketball, and I think every person growing up, basketball is a great sport. I love basketball, and I ran track. I played basketball. We didn't have a baseball team, but we had a softball team. I played softball. But what happened was football was the vehicle that was going to allow me to go to school and get an education. And I probably would have chosen if it was offered to me a basketball scholarship. But basketball was always in my blood. And the one thing, we used to play every off season. We used to play basketball, and even they do it now. The Steelers have off-season basketball team. They go around and they play different schools and different organizations in the city. Every football player thought he should have been a basketball player. You talk to any of these guys, oh yeah, man, I was this, and I'm sure a lot of basketball players probably thought they could play football. But football was the vehicle that I could use to get an education and to better my life. And so it didn't surprise me when all of my sons, I have a son that just finished in Florida A&M. He played basketball in high school and was a great player. Jabri plays, and he was the only one of my three sons that really pursued the basketball side of the sport, of the game. But that's why I chose football, because it was the opportunity that I had at that time.
What would you hope your sons learn from playing organized sports, high school level, collegiate level?
Well, there are so many lessons, as these guys know, and people out there listening. Sports is a great training ground for life. First thing sports, in my opinion, does, it teaches you how to prepare yourself to be successful. The other thing it does, it teaches you how to work together. It teaches you what teamwork. And a lot of people, they'll sit and watch a sport and they don't understand how every player, especially football, that's why it says the ultimate team sport, because you got 11 guys out there. 10 guys can do their job perfect, and that one guy cannot do his job, and everything falls apart. And so that's the beauty of sports, is watching people work together, watching people trust one another, and watching people really understand that if we are successful as a team, then we're all successful. That's why there's no place in sports for prima donnas, because unless you're a golfer, and even a golfer, you got to depend on your caddy, you got to depend on people making sure you get where you want to be. So nothing in life is accomplished without working together with someone. And so the values that you learn in sports are life lessons, because even when you walk off the basketball court or you walk off the football field, you can take what you've learned and apply it in your everyday life.
We have another question?
What advice would you give an athlete, any collegiate athlete that's looking to find that edge and like advancing their career?
Well, the first thing I would do, my first advice would be, make sure you're committed. A lot of guys want to get there, but they don't want to make the commitment. So the first thing I would say, if you want to reach the next level, make sure you're committed. And then committed and commitment means that you're willing to make the sacrifice. I always say that if you want to be an athlete, you can't be hanging out at 11 or 12 o'clock at night with your buddies. Or you have to discipline yourself. And there are things that, as an athlete, that you have to do that other people have no idea of the price that you have to pay. I mean, so you have to be self-disciplined, you have to be committed, and then you have to make sure that everything you do is working towards the goal that you set. You can't be an athlete and drink alcohol and use drugs and smoke pot and whatever it is that young people do. You just can't, it's not going to work. So you have to be able to put all that stuff aside. You have to be strong-willed, and you have to be willing to make the commitment. Then the other thing you have to do, and this is true in life, it's not just about sports. And we've gotten away from this, but any good family or any solid organization, there's a spirituality about that person or that organization. My kids, I raised my kids up in the church because I believe in the Word of God. And I believe that there's a greater being. So all these things you have to have incorporated into who you are and what you're doing. And when you read scripture, you read Psalms 103, it says, oh, bless the Lord, oh my soul, and all that is within me. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, and forget not his benefits. So in other words, there's a benefit to your spiritual life. There's a benefit to having faith. What are some of the benefits? Well, the word goes on to say that he will forgive you of all your iniquities. In other words, God will forgive all your sins. God will protect you, and he will strengthen you in the time of trouble. So there's so much that being successful, because and you see it all the time. You see a lot of people, they are successful, but then what happens? You see their lives fall apart. You know, and you see it all the time, especially with movie stars and athletes and people in the public. You know, and the world will look at him and say, man, that guy's successful. He makes so many $1 million a year, but he has a drug problem, or he's overdosing, or you know, just so you have to have a spiritual presence about you, and it has to be just like your commitment to sports or whatever it is you're pursuing. You have to believe it. You have to be committed to it. You have to feed your soul, feed your spirit, and you do that by reading the Word of God and believing in the Word of God. And I don't know what my sons might turn out to be. I don't know what they'll do and whatever they're pursuing. But this much I do know, that God has a covenant with them, and He has His arms of protection around them, because I prayed that prayer that my kids would be safe in whatever they do, and that my kids would be blessed. And so that is part of who I am, and that's part of what I try to pass along to my kids.
You might have just answered the question I'm going to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyways. You grew up on the farm in Georgia. You get to the NFL. You're mentioned drugs, alcohol, whatever it may be. There had to be somewhat of a culture shock to go from that extreme to the NFL life.
Yeah.
How did you stay focused on doing your job on the field? And like I said, very well maybe come back to your faith like you talked about, but I'm sure that we have players here that are maybe challenged with the same thing away from the court.
Well, it's no question. I'll tell you a real life story that happened to me. I came out of college, and back then we were playing the All-Stars, college All-Stars, and I was a college All-Star, would play the Super Bowl champions. It would take place in Chicago every year, and we trained up at Evanston, Illinois. And so I had this roommate, and I won't name names, but I had this roommate. We all were rookies. He came from a school out there in Texas. I came from Louisiana. And at night, he would be laying over there, and he was smoking, and this smoke had a funny smell to it. And, you know, I'm country naive. And so I said, man, what are you smoking? He just bust out and started laughing. He said, oh, man, you don't know what this is? I said, no. I said, what are you smoking? He said, oh, man, this is marijuana. You got to try it. I said, no, I don't smoke. I don't drink. I don't smoke. So that was my first experience to some of the culture of, you know, drugs and really the National Football League. And this was back in 1970. And so it goes back to what I was talking about, your character, and your spiritual character. You know the difference. You know right, and you know what's wrong, you know what's right. But it really comes down to a person's commitment to himself, to his body, to his sport. That's going to help you and keep you in the straight and narrow. And so you're going to get exposed to a lot of things in life, but you got to know what it is you want. And you got to know the difference in right and wrong. But knowing what you want and knowing the price that you have to pay to get to where you are, you don't want to throw it out away. You want to make sure that everything you do is going to be to help you get to that next level and help you get closer to your goals. I hope that answered some of the question.
Perfect. Let's go. Got a question on the back.
I think sometimes people, I mean, you said commitment and this, I don't think people, sometimes when they see finished product, they see riches, life, enshrinements, they forget about personal difficulties other than just sheer numbers. You know, you broke it down, how many players start playing. So there's two questions. One, personally, what was your initial, I don't want to say obstacle, but roadblock, just personally in your life, other than being the youngest of 11 and probably getting picked on a little bit? What was your personal, your very first personal obstacle? But then after you achieved it, and say now you become a pro, how did you keep that edge? Because I think the thing that is what's extraordinary about your career is, for these guys that don't know, I'm sure some of these guys don't know who you are or what you were doing, but to sustain that high level without, I'm a little bit older than these guys, so it was turf, and there wasn't the shoes. I mean, it was some tape, it was some socks, and let's get it, it wasn't all this aerodynamic equipment. So your first obstacle, but then you clearly cleared that. What then kept you at the top of your game, day in and day out, year in and year out, Super Bowl after Super Bowl?
Well, I'm going to go back a few years when I was a young kid, and my older sister was dating a guy who now is a minister. And when we were growing up, we didn't have television. One of our neighbors, and he was almost a mile away from us because we lived out in the country. They had a television. And so we asked our parents if we could go over there and watch football games, because back then they had started to televise the National Football League on television. And I'll never forget this. It's so clear in my mind. Johnny Unitas, Landon Morris, Raymond Barry, they were the stars of that era. And this was back in the late 50s, early 60s. And so I went over there and I saw them play. And I tell Landon Morris this story all the time. Now, a lot of you guys don't know who Landon Morris is, but Landon Morris was a great running back from Penn State. And he would be the kid from Ohio State that's with the Cowboys now. That's who he was back in that day. And Ezekiel Elliott, that's who he was back in the 50s and 60s. And so my sister's boyfriend, we were out there in the yard, and you got to picture this southern setting. Our yard was dirt, sand, and we used to actually sweep the sand with a broom. That's how we didn't cut grass because we didn't have it. But I told him, I said, one day you all gonna see me on television playing football. And you know, back that was a bold statement, because first of all, little kid like you out here on the farm, how you gonna get to be on TV like these guys? So that was I prophesized that. And then I tell you what really took me to the next level. We had a coach by the name of Jimmy Thacker. God bless his soul, he's passed on. Jimmy Thacker had sent a running back to Allen University, a little small school down in Columbia, South Carolina. But Jimmy Thacker used to get articles that were sent to him from the school, or from this running back. And after every practice, when he got those articles, he would have us sit on the ground at practice. and he would be standing in the center of the circus, in the center of the circle, and he would read this article. Charles Bryant, that was the running back's name, scored touchdown to win the game. Charles Bryant ran for so many yards. And I remember as a kid sitting in that circle saying, one day he's going to be reading to kids about me. And that was a great motivator. So, and I don't have to say this because you all are in the audience, but coaches have a tremendous impact on players. And so it motivated me. Now, the toughest thing I had to overcome with the other part of your question was that I had come home in 1966. I came home and sitting and talking to my dad. And you know, normal dad, he asked this question, say, well, son, what is it you want to do with your life? And I told him, I said, I want to play football, and I want to come back and pay the farm out of there. Because I told you we grew up on a farm. My family owned land, we still own the land, but if you can imagine growing up in the South, doing Jim Crow and doing segregation, for black people to own anything is difficult. But my mother's father had like 1,500 acres of land, which we still have in the family today. And he had given my mother another parcel of land that had 135 acres on it. But back in those days, you would go to the bank and you borrow money against your property to grow your crops, and you sell your crops and you go pay the bank off, and whatever left you lived off. Well, for several years there, while I was in college and even while I was there working on that farm, you know, the debt had built and they wasn't able to make the notes. And so that's why I told my father that I wanted to play sports, play football, and come back and pay the farm out of that. Well, that was the last conversation I had with my father. That was in December of 1966. In February of 1967, he passed away. Now remember, I've already told you how lonesome I was and how lonely I was out there in college. You're talking about from Georgia to Louisiana, probably 400 and some miles plus. And so when I got the news that my father had passed, growing up with a close-knit family and never having anyone that close to me pass away, that was the most difficult challenge of my life. But there again, through faith and through strong family support, I was able to overcome it. And I'll never forget, I used to have these terrible headaches. And that was after my father passed. And they sent me to specialists in Savannah. And I'll never forget this one doctor. I'll never forget him saying that this kid needs to just get back out there at school and not worry about what's going on at home. He said, because these are tension headaches. He said he's just grieving over something that he should just forget about it. And so even that helped me to become stronger in my faith. And so that was very difficult. But there have been other difficulties that have taken place, but to me that was probably the most challenging one in my young life.
What do you think your father would say if he saw your enshrinement speech, saw you in the Hall of Fame, and on top of that, saw his grandkids playing college sports and succeed in that aspect of life?
Well, let me try to give you a picture of who my father was. My father was he was a farmer. Okay, and farmers, if you know farmers, it's all about the farm. It's all about work, and even a lot of times when I wanted to stay and practice, I couldn't stay because he needed me on the farm doing work, and that was a priority to him. And so
my dad, I grew up on a farm. My father's a farmer.
So you understand that. So he looked at playing football as just out there playing, recreation, you know. And said, no, son, you got to be here at work. But I told my father that I wanted to play ball and I wanted to pay the farm out of it. I was able to do that, and I thank God for that, because in my second year in the league, I paid our farm. Out of that, my mother was still living there as a widow, and my mother lived there until 2014, when she passed away at 103, which is incredible, because she went from worrying about whether or not she was going to be able to keep the farm, to being able to live there and see her kids and her grandkids grow, and not all of that. I went back and I started investing in my family, my brother, sisters' kids, and those kids. Now we have doctors, veterinarians, and school teachers in our family, because someone reached back, and that's one of the things, especially for African Americans. A lot of times, and you see it even now, kids get signed, they go back and they buy their mother a house, or because those were things that we were deprived of, or didn't have the money because of the circumstances or whatever. And so my story was similar. I was paying off a farm, and then I started investing not only my resources, my time, but my knowledge and everything into my kids, letting them, my nieces and nephews, letting them know how important it is for them to pursue their education. So, and a lot of my 90% of my nieces and nephews went to HBC schools, which is historical black colleges. We have a niece. I have a niece out in Tuskegee. She's a veterinarian. My other nephew was the first African American to teach law at the University of Georgia. When I came out of school, University of Georgia wasn't accepting African Americans. So it just goes to show you when you're committed, and when you're willing to do the right thing, and when you really put other people before yourself. And that's one of the qualities of any individual, a great person, whether you're in the Hall of Fame or not. When you can put other people before yourself, there's no question that not only are you investing in their lives, but God is investing and blessing you at the same time.
Let's go ahead, Jake. We're going to see if we have a question from Malone University there for Mr. Blount.
Yes. First, Mr. Blount, I wanted to say hi. My dad was the director of the Pro Football Hall of Fame a while back, John Banker. So I just wanted to say hello on behalf of, I've met you several times, so he was the former director there in the Hall of Fame. But anyway, I'm the director of sport management here at Malone, and what I always try to pass along to our sport management majors is, hey, it is definitely better to give. You get so much more giving in life, and you'll go much farther when you do that. Can you give us an example of maybe a success story or two from a student that you've kind of brought under your wings that maybe helped you at the Mel Blount Youth Home, that kind of you showed him, brought him in, and had him kind of help you in that process there, and how he maybe grew after that experience of giving?
We have a boys' home. In fact, we started a home in Georgia in 1983, and then we started the second home in Pennsylvania, right outside of Pittsburgh, in 1989. There are several examples. We had a young man who came to us because his parents were drug and alcohol and had all kind of issues, and so he could never figure out why he was at the boys' home. It was like a lot of times he said, "Mr. Bell, I haven't gotten in any trouble, I haven't done anything," and I would encourage him, "You are here because this is the best place for you, and we want to help you." And so this kid stayed with us 2.5 years, finished high school. We sent him to Morehouse University in Atlanta. We bought books for him, helped pay for his education. Now this kid he finished from Morehouse, and he's working on his master's degree at Jackson State University. And so he's been a great success story of a kid who basically was unwanted at home because of the drug issues that parents have, and so we were able to help this young man. We have another young man that I'm very proud of who came to us, and this kid was a gangbanger. I mean, he was a bad dude. He was a bad dude, and he came to us, and Brandon stayed with us. We worked with him. We took him to church. We had Bible study, every Tuesday out there. So we really planted some seeds in this kid's life. Brandon Knott is a minister. And we just had a youth summit at our boys' home this summer. Brandon came by and he told stories that I wasn't even aware of. I mean, he told stories about how him and his boys would go out they was going out on a hit. And he tell stories about how the one kid that his partner shot and his brain matter splattered all over his clothes. I mean, just detailed stuff that really, just makes you cringe. And he talked about how, he went to prison. This was after he left the boys. He went to prison. And he got out of prison. He said, God spoke to him and said, now, what if you go back and start doing this again, you're gonna get yourself in trouble. You're gonna get killed. And he told a story about how one night the guy put a gun to his head and he pulled the trigger, and the gun misfired. That's the only reason he was alive today. And he said it was nothing but God. But he was talking. Now you got to understand, he was talking to about 400 young people, and he's telling these stories about his experience and the things that he went through. But when he finished his presentation, he talked about how important it is to have Christ in your life and how God has changed him. And now he's able not only to give his testimony, but he's also ministering to young people in the streets about the difference in doing right and doing wrong, and what the benefits are. What the benefits are of doing right and having Christ in your life. So those are some of the stories that I heard from Brandon that I wasn't even aware. But we've had a lot of kids at our boys' home. We have had kids that we have paid for their funerals. And one of the tragic stories that I remember was a young man we had in our program. The caseworker wanted him to go home, and we was telling her, this kid is not ready to go home. He doesn't need to go home yet. But they insisted, because these were all court-appointed kids. Well, the courts say that they have to have home visits. So the kid went home about 12 o'clock on a Saturday morning. By 3 o'clock, he was shot in the back of the head, execution style. We sit there one night watching television, watching the news. That's how we found out that kid. And we knew that he shouldn't have gone home, but those are some of the experiences. But I guess the moral of this whole story that I'm telling you is that don't ever put yourself in a situation, especially when you know it's not right. Don't put yourself in a situation, or don't put yourself in harm's way, because it's so easy to get in trouble, but it's so hard to get out of it. And so we see all types of kids come through our program. And the one thing that we do try to do is to plant that seed so that they can understand the importance of having Christ in their life and knowing the difference of right and wrong. And respect. We teach the old-fashioned principles. You know, the Bible says you raise the child up in the way that they should go, and when they become old, they shall not depart from that way. You know, whatever happened to teaching your kids to say yes, sir, and say no, sir, and yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and thank you, and please, and all of these things that really help shapes and mold the character of a person. First of all, it's not being taught in this day and time, in the new millennium, but like I said, I'm old school, I'm a baby boomer. It was taught to me and I teach it to my kids. And these are some of the things that we have to get back to if we want to be a great nation, and if we want our young people to grow up and be productive and be leaders in our society.
Question right up front.
Well, it's not a question. This is these guys always joking about being on and stuff like that. And I wanted to tell them just about like times you had when you were growing up, being the youngest of 11 and like living on the farm and stuff like that. So they were kind of from a really good perspective.
Well, my experience growing up on a farm, and you got to kind of step back into time when there wasn't vehicles, there wasn't cell phones, we didn't have a line telephone, we didn't have television. I left school. I graduated in 1966. Living on a farm in 1966, black folks in the South didn't have indoor plumbing. We had well water and we had outdoor bathrooms. And if you took a shower, you took a shower outside, you drew the water from the well and you put it in a tub and you washed yourself. And so that was the kind of way I grew up. We would get up working on that farm. We'd get up 3 o'clock in the morning and we would go to the tobacco barns because my parents grew tobacco. And this tobacco, we would prop the tobacco in the field, put it in a sled. The mules would drag it to the barn where they had a table where the ladies would string it up on sticks. Then we put it and take it and we would hang it up in the barn for it to cure. Well, when it cured, we had to take it out of the barn because tobacco was a money crop back then. That was before all these laws and regulations about smoking and tobacco and all that. So we would get when the tobacco was cured, it would be brittle. And so we had to get it out of the barn early in the morning while the dew was still out, the salt and the leaves. And so we get up 3 o'clock in the morning, we'd be up in the back, taking the back out, taking it to the barn. So that was just part of the routine that took place on the farm. And picking cotton. I used to hate picking cotton, but that was the way of life back then. You know, I could never quite get to that 100 pounds. That was kind of the benchmark. You had to pick 100 pounds of cotton a day. And if you picked 100 pounds of cotton, you know, you would get $3. That was the going rate. And my mother, I've seen my mother and my aunts and all, sometimes they pick 150, sometimes 200 pounds of cotton a day. But that was the life. That was the life of the Southern farm person. I mean, even if you're black or white, because white folks pick cotton too. But the thing that it taught me was a good work ethic. You know, life is not easy, and anything, whether you're trying to be a basketball player or football, you have to work. You have to be willing to work. And work, you can't be allergic to. You have to embrace it. And so my whole childhood, I thought it was great. And I still might, even now, at the age of 68, I think I had a great childhood because a lot of the things that you all have to deal with, I didn't have to deal with. I didn't have to deal with my buddies using drugs, or I didn't have to deal with the distractions of cell phones and all the other things that you guys have going on. But I can tell you this, if you stay focused, if you stay committed, I don't care what they throw at you, you can overcome it. But you have to have a relentless desire to achieve what it is you have to have that thirst for it. You have to really, really want it.
Any other questions?
I got a question. I was gonna ask, what was like the hardest time in your life through growing up, high school, college, pros, like that you like really tapped the grind the hardest?
Well, I think it was a tremendous focus. I just told you about my father when I was a freshman. My sophomore year, my brother's wife passed, and you know, my junior year, my two sisters and her daughter was killed in a head-on car accident. All through my life, it's been challenging. My nephew was drowned in my backyard out there swimming with my daughter and some of their friends. I mean, these are tragedies that happen, but you know, through all of the things that I've been through, I've seen the grace of God in it. I've seen God's hands in it. It has helped make me a stronger person, a better person, and it has allowed me to be able to, on my journey, be able to share with other people the importance of having Christ in their lives, the importance of staying true to who you are, and that's important. Don't ever try to be something that you're not, or don't ever try to be someone that you're not. Just be who you are, and just believe that God made you special. You're different. You're different from anybody else on this planet, and God knows that. He knows your voice. Of all the millions of people on this earth, God, when He hears your voice, He knows. I know that's Mel Blount. Oh, I know that's Rob. I know that's Degree. I know that voice. And so, I said it earlier. Every face on this planet has a story to tell. But you know what separates the ones who make it and the ones who don't? It's their faith and their commitment. That's what separates. I mean, and I know you guys know guys probably were better ball players than you were, but they didn't get the scholarship because they didn't get the grades, or they was out smoking pot or drinking alcohol. They didn't make the sacrifice. I know guys who were a lot better than me through high school and some in college, but they didn't make that commitment. That's the difference. It's the little things that separates. It's the little things, not all these others, but it's the little things like doing the right thing, or being on time, setting examples for others, being a leader. All these things help shape, because somebody's watching you. You never know. When you guys out there on that basketball court, you don't know who's in the stands. You don't know what organization or what company or what pro team that they're representing. They're looking for talent. And they're not just looking for talent, they're looking for character. They're looking for commitment. They're looking for dedication, all these things. And that's what separates the ones who make it and the ones who don't. It's the things that people see it.
When you say that everyone has a story to tell, we have about 5 minutes left. And doing some research for the program, there was a story I found online, and I don't think they're allowed to put it on the internet. It's not true. So I'm assuming this story is true unless you tell me otherwise. There's a story out there that you once jumped over a car in a three-piece suit.
No,
Is that true or false?
Well, you know, let me just say this. I was blessed with tremendous ability. And when I say I was blessed, it's not something that I just worked and developed. It was something that was given to me, but I did work to maintain it through my 14 years of professional football. And when I look back at my life, 4 years in high school, 4 years in college, 14 years in the league, that's 22 years of football out of my life. I was blessed to never have an operation, never had a broken bone, and only missed one game in the pros, and that because I had a fungus between my little toe, and we had clinched the division, and I didn't play. But yeah, it is true what you read, but it's not something I go around advertising.
I'll do it for you.
But I would be sitting in a chair like this, and there might be a sofa in front of me, and I would just jump over the sofa just to see if I could do it. And I'll never forget one of my teammates, Glenn Edwards. He saw me do that, and he was just amazed. Then there was a little contest that we did. Lance Swan was known for his leaping ability. I mean, he made these acrobatic catches in the game. So we was in the locker room one day, and Len jumped up and tapped his feet together. He did it twice. And Chuck looked at me because Chuck knew that I was one of the better athletes on the team, and he said, "Can you do that?" I said, "Maybe so." So I jumped higher, and I tapped my feet twice like that. And so it's just little things like that we used to do. But we had just great athletes on our team, as you can imagine, to win 4 championships in 6 years. But yeah, I don't know if I was in a 3-piece suit or I was in a suit.
Okay. 3-piece or whatever, in
What
dress
shoes did you have on?
Tell them about the times like when you were with your brothers and stuff. When you guys like play, fire the box and stuff like that. Like,
Oh well, you can imagine. Out of 11 kids, there were 7 boys, 4 girls, and we would always entertain ourselves, especially when our parents would go to town to buy groceries and stuff, and they leave us out there, and they had all these rules. Don't do this, don't do that. Well, as kids, everything they told us not to do, we had to figure out why they were telling us. I'll never forget. We had a big bull out there, and my dad said, "Well, you also don't be out there trying to ride these bulls and stuff." So, as soon as they left the farm, that's what we did. We got out there on the bulls, and I'll never forget. My brother had this rope around this one bull, and I got bucked off in the rope. I got a rope burn, so that everybody, "Oh man, we got to get in trouble because when our parents get back." And so the other thing, we would wrestle, we would box. I mean, we just had a good time. I mean, it was all clean fun, but it was competitive fun because your brothers. It was like establishing a pecking order. So we would wrestle, and then this one time, my dad used to chew tobacco, and so he had left some tobacco, and so when they went to town. All of us started chewing this tobacco, and we got sick as a dog. It was just little things like that. But I guess as far as growing up and being boys, we would always be competitive. If it wasn't arm wrestling, we were wrestling. If it wasn't that, we was out there playing sports and just being competitive. But it was a fun time growing up. And back in those days, you had to entertain yourself because we didn't have television, we didn't have all this stuff, the internet and all that. It wasn't even thought of or created. We didn't have phones, so it was just you had to create your own fun. I hope that.
I was talking about the story when Uncle Clint had the guy come and he was trying to get boxing.
Oh, my brother and his friend. We were all, like I said, competitive. So my brother had this guy, and he was telling me that his friend could beat me boxing. I said, okay, well, we put on the gloves and we started boxing, and I beat the guy up. And so my brother, he was telling my boys about that. And this was like, I think I was in the 10th grade then. And so that's one of the stories that, when you sit around as a family and your brothers, they start sharing stories with your kids about what your dad was like when he was growing up. So that's one of the stories I think that Jabri remembers. But it was a good life, and like I said, the older I get, the more I appreciate the experience.
We have just a minute or so left, so if there's anything, sir, you'd like to share, or one last question?
I got a question. I know, like, for all of us in here, like, the ball stops one day, and we'll stop playing sports one day. So I know it's not for you. Like, so what keeps you, like, motivated to keep doing what you're doing, like making positive impacts on lives? And what keeps you motivated?
Well, I think one is the commitment that I made, to work with young people, and the experience that I had was in the 70s, late 70s, we was winning championships. All these kids that I told you about that I helped through school, and now they're lawyers, doctors, veterinarians. They were little kids, and I would go back to Vidalia, Georgia. Now you got to remember, Vidalia, Georgia, even now is a small area, but back in the 70s, I think they had a population of about 3,500 people. And so when my nieces and nephews would go into school, they would tell all their friends their Uncle Mel was home. Well, they had seen us on television. They, saw us winning Super Bowls, and all these kids would be out there on the farm. And it was something that I just could see in their eyes that I should do more than just take pictures with them and sign autographs. And that really was the birth of the Mel Blount Youth Home. And so we start working with kids, and then we start housing kids, and now we're still doing all of that. But the motivation is that I want to see our young people be better. I want to see them better than what we were as young people. I want to see them grow and develop and be productive citizens and be leaders in our world, because now it's not just a community just in the United States, it's a world community. And so when you go out in life, now you're going to have to compete on the world stage. And so you have to be prepared, and you have to have all these tools that we're talking about. You got to have the character, you got to have the commitment, you got to have the education, and you got to be a good person, because there's so many things out there that you can easily get distracted from. And so I know, one of the great quotes that Lou Holtz, who was a coach at Notre Dame, he talked about, you can have ability, but ability just really says what you're capable of doing. And then you can have motivation, which determines what you do. And then he said attitude really determines how well you do it. And so basically what he's saying is that it really comes back to you. You got the ability, you got to be motivated, and then you got to have the attitude. And so many times in situations in games, situations in life, the difference is the attitude. What kind of attitude you take into it? I mean, you might be down 4 points with 50-some seconds left. Or do you have the kind of mindset and the attitude to really go out there and get it done? And it's the same in life. I mean, I know sometimes we're faced with very difficult situations at that boys' home. What are we going to do? Are you just going to lay back and fold up, or are you going to rise up to the challenge and make the difference? And that's the difference between winners and losers.
Well, I think that concludes our program. We're at the top of our hour. I know we have to be cognizant of schedules here and for our schools tuning in. So, Mr. Blount, I want to just thank you. It's been fun to sit here and listen to you talk. Hopefully, you guys took something away from the program that can help you in your own journeys on the basketball court, as well as off the court. But that was great. Thank you.